Welcome to another episode of Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber. Let us get to the questions. Obviously, if you want to ask a question and you're on YouTube, you can a super chat, and I will try and get to those as best I can. But we'll go through all the Patreon ones. My Wi-Fi is hanging on by a thread at this stage, so I will try and get through the podcast as quickly as possible. We have a couple of dropouts. There's not much I can do. I'm on holiday, staying in random places, watching on YouTube. It's kind of eerie. The backdrop and everything I have at the moment, but still, just doing the best I can to record and still get stuff up. So sorry about that. That's I suppose what happens when you're recording when you're on holiday. All right, let's start with the first question, which I think is a good one. Aditya says, in case World War II had happened, do you think Bradman would have been the first batter to cross 10,000 test runs and 50 test hundreds? At the same time, making an average of 100. Also, apart from Bradman, which other players were most affected by World War II in that they were robbed of their prime years? Yeah, I'd have to go back and have to look at the exact numbers, but he missed out on 7 years and he scored 7,000 runs. Maybe he retires slightly earlier, of course, which is a fairly normal thing for Australian cricketers, I suppose, in that era to have done. So if that's the case, Bradman probably changes a little bit. But yeah, the extra 3,000 runs I don't think would have been that big an issue for him over that period of time. I don't think there's anything that would have gone on in his game that would have changed his average or anything else. So from that point of view, yeah, he would have been pretty handy. He was very affected by World War II, of course. He passed away. He was a brilliant bowler for the war. There was a whole bunch of New Zealand bowlers who There was a whole bunch of New Zealand batters, I think, who I'm trying to think of the names. I want to say Martin Donnelly. I feel like that's the name. Who basically, we never saw the best of. I'm trying to think of some of the other players. Oh, well, George Headley's another really good one from the West Indies. Some of the English players who were coming through beforehand. I think there was a lot of players who maybe we hadn't quite seen the most of. Chuck Fleetwood would have been a really interesting one. We saw him put in those horrendous figures at the Oval, but you talk to the other spinners at that time, and they say that he might have been most talented out of all of them. Left arm wrist spinner who could bowl at top pace. We still never really had anyone outside of Michael Bevan in a test match or two, anything like that. So he was a fantastic cricketer. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I mean, in truth, would have been a lot of cricket, but we won't know about all of them because you almost need to have been good between 35 and 38, and really established yourself and then missed out on your peak years. I think it would have been really interesting to see where George Headley would have gone from the perspective of he was already, one of the world's best batters at that point. He would have put a lot of pressure on West Indies cricket to change quicker than it did when it comes to the leadership, giving black players the captaincy and everything else. Patrick says, do you have special batting skills in a keeper batter as opposed to being a regular batter? No, I don't think so. I've always thought when you're a specialist keeper, there are certain things that you are good at doing that normal batters are not as good at doing. So I'm trying to think of the best way of putting it. That sort of Jack Russell type player who can kind of stay out there. Prasanna J. Warden was probably pretty similar, actually. Who can stay out there that they may not quite read the game as a batter and they may not see the ball in the exact same way that a batter would, but their extra skills as a wicketkeeper, especially in those two cases, because they were so good as wicketkeeping, allowed them to be handier batters than probably they deserve to be. But I don't think there's, other than tiredness and fitness, which I think are incredibly important things when it comes to being a keeper batter, I don't think there's any big difference between the two. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, that there's a freedom involved with being a keeper batter. And we do know that in Test cricket, there is a big drop-off in the fourth innings when you're a keeper. And I don't think it's quite as stark in first-class cricket, probably just because there is, one fewer down 92 overs. But I think, more or less, the batting skills are exactly the same for both. It's just that there are probably some wicket keepers out there who have separate kinds of skills. Dashmo says, was Joel Garner just as good as Curtly Ambrose? I saw this question when I was popping them. I think, and I say this with Curtly Ambrose was the guy who I imitated in the backyard. I think if you've watched the YouTube video, I think I have 3 Curtly Ambrose t-shirts. One of my favorite cricketers of all time. I think pound for pound, Joel Gunner was a better bowler than Curtly Ambrose. I think he was a slightly better one-day bowler. And I think he was as good a test bowler, but I'm going to put one massive caveat here. Joel Garner bowled first change. He didn't get access to the new ball the way that Curtly Ambrose did. To have Joel Garner's record at first change, I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. And partly it's because there were so many good West Indian bowlers. He had, Roberts, Holding before him, Marshall, Ambrose after him, plus great bowlers in and around him, and Walsh was there as well. But I don't think he ever got the credit he deserved, partly because we didn't look at stats this way, and we didn't have all this. But there's Ginger Rogers' line of, it did it backwards in heels. With someone, wasn't there a movie recently that made fun of that and said that isn't the case because it went around circles. But anyway, I think if we really were being honest, Joel Garner's probably the best first change bowler in the history of cricket. It's certainly best first change seam bowler in the history of cricket. And Curtly Ambrose isn't in the best 2 opening bowlers of all time. As good as he was, I don't think you would automatically put him in the best 2 opening bowlers of all time. And so with that in mind, I would probably pick Garner. But there's not much in it. I mean, I think Ambrose would have. I actually think the way Ambrose bowled, he also would have been a fine first change bowler as well. But I just think that Garner was made to do that and to end up with a bowling average of around 20 without getting the new ball the way that all the other greatest bowlers, seam bowlers in history, really have. If you look at the best change bowlers of all time, you're really looking at Garner, Morne Morkel, Jacques Kallis. I'm missing one. Neil Wagner. There aren't that many, right? That's a lot of recent guys. And so, throughout the history of the game, the seam bowlers have been new ball bowlers, which don't need to anyone makes the most sense. The ball's going to do the most for them at that point. So to be as good as Joel Garner without getting the new ball, I just think is absolutely, next level. Perhaps, it would be worth me having a look at the difference between his record when he, on the rare occasions he did get the new ball, but I think he was absolutely fantastic bowler. Will says, as the game becomes more and more professional, will any international player ever be as bad at bat as Chris Martin for as long as he was? Yes. And I get your overall point there. However, I think the game will probably become more specialized in certain ways. In fact, you may even get a point where, I've talked about this before, we may have substitutions all for the cricket. Certainly T20 cricket, it's basically there, not quite, but basically there. And I think we will get substitution. So I think we'll actually get people a complete specialist. And if you look at baseball, or Otani's sort of changing baseball a little bit. If you look at baseball, certainly the more professional baseball got, the worse pitchers got at batting. And the less they had to bat in the end, and then they just stopped them batting. I would assume cricket's more likely in that direction than anything else. And so, the next Chris Martin might not even have a reason to work on his batting. All right. James says, can you see any reason that Virat Kohli is so much better in T20 Is than IPL, or is it likely just variance? Look, variance probably plays a huge part in this. The one thing I would say is that he has had very good IPL seasons before. And so he may not have, he obviously struggled at times as well. And you're right, his T20 national is certainly much better. But it's not that he's never made runs in the IPL. So that kind of, again, leans me towards variance a little bit more. The only addendum I would make to that is, it's my memory, and I haven't looked it up, but my memory is he's much better against seam bowling in T20 cricket than he is against spin bowling, which hasn't always been the case in other formats of cricket. But I think in T20 cricket slows down a lot against spinners and knocks them around a little bit, and then occasionally, goes long and straight. International cricket, I wonder if the quality of the spin bowlers he has faced hasn't been as strong, because there's a lot of teams out there that are seam bowler dependent. He really get that in the IPL. You're always going to face 2/3, probably one strong spinner, maybe two strong spinners, and a third spinner who can do something. That's not as common in international cricket. There's a lot of teams that just have that, that amount of bowlers available to them. So I wonder if it's a part of it, but I don't know. Vivek says, will we ever see a mixed gender league in 2020, like mixed doubles in tennis? If so, how do you envision it playing out, specific roles for specific genders? I suppose cricket currently played, you would assume that spinners and wicket keepers would be the obvious place that would fit into mixed gender mixed gender teams. The power is the biggest problem with the batting. The problem that women have, and talking to women players a lot when they play against men, is usually height. And you see that a little bit with the tennis. The power is a problem, but also the height is a problem when they play against, mixed doubles partners. Quite often get those big 6'7", doubles specialists who really give the women a lot of trouble. They can put a little bit of top spin on the ball, and it's just going to be above the woman's shoulder consistently. And that's the biggest problem with batting for women. I'm saying pace can't be a problem, and their lack of power can't be a problem, but they can use the pace of the bowlers. The biggest problem is just their inability to get on top of the ball. When you play a lot of women's cricket, you don't play people who are bowling, over the height of 6'3" that often. I've mentioned this a lot, but Alice Sutherland is a particularly slow bowler, but she also happens to be massively tall and has a very, very upright action. And I don't have the CricViz or the Hawkeye stats. So he has probably one of the highest releases, and it means that even being a lot slower, it causes problems. So the height is massively a problem. I think we'll ever see mixed gender cricket teams. I just don't think it's something we're moving towards. But if we did, as I said, spin bowling is an interesting thing. There are certain spin bowlers like Jess Jonathan, I think, who would do very, very well in against men or hold their own against men. The wicket keeping is the other obvious one. Sarah Taylor was sort of a pioneer in that way, and we know that in some ways women's cricket encourages better wicket keeping skills because you keep at the stumps more often, and so it does actually allow for I won't say more specialists, but you're working on the skill aspect a little bit more than the athletic side of things in men's wicket keeping. Ian says, had their careers overlapped, how would Stokes and Flintoff have complemented each other across formats for England? Okay. So if you have them in Test cricket, it's a bit tricky because you have to think about the wicketkeeper here. But if you had them in Test cricket, would not have had Stokes batting at 5 or 6. Yeah. Could you have had Stokes at 5, wicketkeeper at 6, Flintoff at 7? Let's just say it's Bairstow or Pryor. Those are probably the wicketkeepers that each player probably played the most with. Just guessing, but you can throw Butler in there as well if you wanted to. Then I think you're getting the most out of Flintoff if he's bat at 7. Rather than trying to bat him at number 6, where he had some batting skill, but he was a weak number 6. And then you also have Stokes batting at number 6, whereas obviously we've seen him batting at number 5. He's got quite a low average for a guy who bats at number 5. So I'd rather see him at number 6. Him. No, I'm getting my numbers wrong here. No, he'd still have to bat at number 5, wouldn't he? So then you'd have him and Flintoff at 5 and 7, wicketkeeper at number 6. That would allow them to probably play, more specialist spinners. I think you get the most out of Flintoff, the batter, in that situation. And you would also probably not work Flintoff into the ground as much because you could give some of those, longer spells to Stokes, who wasn't as good a bowler as Flintoff, of course, but has one of the similar kinds of spells to him. That meant also you would have 2 90-mile-an-hour bowlers, slightly different kinds of bowlers in your side, which means that they could have continued to pick, Stokes and Anderson Broad, into that point, and a specialist. Yeah, and have a specialist spinner in that lineup. If they wanted to, they could have picked another all-rounder as well. So it would have been quite flexible. That would work in Test cricket. One day cricket. What would you do in one day cricket? You pick Flintoff probably as number 7 as well, and you use Stokes as your number 5, and you use Stokes as your 6th bowling option, not him having to bowl anymore. And Freddie bowls his full 10, and then he is a floater in the batting order. I think really good lineup. T20 cricket, obviously, Freddie could have kind of batted anywhere. I still think that Stokes probably the one thing where Freddie's batting maybe makes more sense than Stokes' batting, just because of the way they play, and you play him as occasionally a power play pinch hitter with Freddie, and then he comes in automatically in the 15th over. He bowls his full 4 overs, and again, if you have Stokes in that lineup, you have the ability for him to be a very, very high quality 6 bowler. I think in white ball cricket, I think that's Stokes' best role, and I think that's always been his problem. Is people tried to get the maximum moves out of him, and he can't. The interesting question though, Ian. Was that it? Was that on the Patreon? I didn't miss anyone, did I? I missed heaps of people. What am I talking about? I thought I did. All right. Josh says, do you think Bolt will play at the World Cup? Yes, I think he will play. I think, having a quality left armer who understands Asian conditions makes sense. I'd be surprised if they didn't go in with him. Also, you have the fielding with Bolt as well, and the experience with Bolt. A lot of different aspects to that. Whether he does is more a political question, I think. If I was running New Zealand cricket and I just lost Williamson, I think having Bolt around probably makes a lot of sense. I think Guptill and Bolt may get in now just through a leadership vacuum as much as anything else. An experience vacuum. Is that a thing? It's a thing now. But yeah, I think from those perspectives, it probably makes sense for Bolt to go. I haven't looked at his recent ODI record, but because he's been playing in the IPL and, obviously with Mumbai, it kind of makes him over there, I would have thought. Bloody Bugger says, I typically agree that the players today are more skilled than those from yesteryear, but not quite convinced that when it comes to playing spin, especially in Asia. Are today's players really better than Jay Warden and Dravid? Okay, so the big difference is that what you are comparing them to is players who played against spin in an era pre-DRS. Certain before the bowlers got completely optimized to bowling towards DRS. So when you look at something like that, it has become a lot more difficult to play that. And you go on to talk about that in your question as well. So I can't remember. I might have been John Langer was talking to the Australian players once about playing spin. And it wasn't on the documentary, but it might have been something he was talking about at a press conference, and he was saying something. And I was thinking, everything he's just said doesn't make any sense because of DRS. Now, I think Jay Warden and Dravid are probably 2 examples of players who, I won't say worked it out, but evolved with it a little bit more than some of the other players. And there's absolutely no doubt that they were, top level players. But they also didn't have to play on the kinds of wickets that Indian test matches have had to go out against. The averages haven't dropped massively against spin, though. So I think when people are talking about that, they're really talking about India, and got pitches that are purposely juiced up for some of the best spin bowlers in the world. And, Joe Root's taking wickets on them, right? And, Kuhneman coming in on work experience and taking wickets. So I think from that perspective, I think you'd be a little bit... I don't think that's the best way of looking at it. I think that the rest of the world, I haven't seen the numbers drop off against spin bowling outside of India. I haven't looked of recent times, so maybe that has dropped. The last time I checked, the averages against spin had held up pretty well. So I just think it's way harder to play spin now. And I think over the last 5 years or so, maybe after Graham Swan, maybe Rangana Harath kind of worked out DRS bowling. From that moment onwards, it's been really hard for everyone. Every spin has the template now of what they need to do. Christopher says, if when the IPL does expand further, do you think we're likely to get one longer window, or do you think they may split it up into 2, have May and then October, November? I think from cost perspective, and from how TV works, I think it would make much more sense to have it all in one go, sponsors and everything else. But from what I've heard, there is a bit of a movement to have 2 tournaments. I think in the long run, that's a bit stupid, and you're just better off to have one long tournament. However, if that is that is the way they go, there's I think there are strengths in it. For instance, they are probably looking in the moment and seeing a dip in their figures. But I think you see that with most sporting leagues in the world. There's the excitement that's back. You've got season games, and then the finals are coming back, and everyone sort of starts tuning in again. I don't have an issue with that, but I can understand why people are thinking, well, if we just had 2 months tournament and 2 months tournament, maybe we could mitigate some of that. Maybe they're right, but it just feels to me that you would have a winner who wins a tournament, and then 6 months later you'd have another winner. That may cause its own kind of burnout, a different kind of burnout. So my guess is that eventually they will come to the belief that they're better off at having a 4-month long season than 2-month seasons, or whatever their alternate vision is. But there are certainly people within the IPL structure who the opposite of that. Prashant says, oh my God, football clauses in their contracts about not pursuing certain activities. For example, Bayern Munich is reportedly thinking about adding a new policy. Lots of leagues, lots of sports around the world have things like this. Will we see such clauses, including cricketers' contracts too, like no golfing? That's quite funny. Larger question: how much will the franchises and boards dictate the players' lifestyle and fitness as we move ahead? Look, they're already doing. I can't think of any cricket board that has a specific rule, but I think if you were a player if you're a fast bowler and bungee jumping, I think that would be frowned upon. I know there was a cricket board that didn't want their players to be spots. So I don't know if these things are in contracts or not at the moment. And when you're talking about franchises like Bayern Munich, they have individual contracts, which are a little bit different to what international contracts are going for. But I do think there are probably franchise contracts that might suggest things like that. But I think at the moment you don't get paid if you get injured anyway. So in a lot of those leagues, you get a very small base pay, whatever it is. I can't remember the full details now. So it doesn't really make sense for you to go out and do any of those things as it currently stands. And Gary says, deferring to your superior knowledge of leg spin, could be everything. Have you seen much of Ben White? Just made his first class debut in a test match. Has extremely overspin based action. Ireland seem determined to blood him, but I'm not sure there's enough to work with. So someone, I haven't seen much of this test match, but someone sent me clips on. I can't remember why, but someone sent me clips on him at one stage. Look, there's an energy that I suppose he has on the ball, but I need to see a little bit more on him and really do some deeper analysis to have a look at it. Ireland are desperate for left arm pace and wrist spin because those are the areas that they've really struggled in to cricket. I'm trying to remember who that wrist spinner was. That's like a part-time. Is it Gareth Dilling? I can't remember. Whoever the part-time spinner that they have is. They're really desperate for those sorts of things. They want, part of the problem with Ireland cricket has been, it's not that they haven't produced good players, but they've all been kind of similar, right? So right arm, medium, fast type guys and sort of solid, not around type batters. They really do need to find, more dynamic types of players at the top level. I talk about this all the time. You need to be able to problem solve. You need to be able to come up with different lineups. You need to have players with unique skill sets that match with each other rather than a bunch of players who are all the same, to talk about their neighbours. Is that the way of putting it? Well, close enough. Scotland, that the whole left arm, you've got two spinners that are probably, especially more talented than any spinner in Ireland, but they both happen to be left arm finger spinners. These sorts of things matter. And I think for Ireland, to be able to find a goal with a skill set is an important thing for them. Anyway, you're listening to Wagon Wheel with Jarrod Kimber. We will take a break and after the break, I'll go through comments. Remember, if you want to do a super chat, you can. And if you don't want to do a super chat, that's more than fine. And if I find your question and it's sexy, I will put it on. Googlies, quarter-seamer, Karen, Dukes, back of the hand, red, leg cutters, Tisra, pink, knuckle, white, slider, seed, heavy, bounces, cherry, length, pill, off cutters, old, crimson traveller, kookaburra, hard, outswing, second new, off spin, arm, SG, split finger, shiny, leg spin, soft, new, Yorkers, flippers, wrong-uns, long hops, reverse swing, half volley, and third new. These are just some of the names we use for balls in cricket. Well, Manscaped wants you to be as proud of your balls as you are of the ones delivered by your favourite cricketer. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer, 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Insert the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. I've actually used this, not just something that I'm hawking for fun, and I got to admit, I thought it was a bit silly, and then I went down there, and it was exceptional. I honestly feel I could bowl outswing with one nut and inswing with the other. So get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. Manscaped, for the man who cares about his balls as much as the ones out in the middle. All right, welcome back. A Carnival of Sorts says, has international cricket been conspiring for years to simply prevent Andy McBride from reaching his destiny of being the true MVP in Asia? The Irish Ravage of Asia. I mean, if you follow my work, you probably know that I'm obsessed with Andy McBride. Absolutely love him. I don't know if I talked about this one, before, but I once interviewed him, and he looked at his feet the entire interview and mumbled. And I'm not sure I understood that he said, or that he said anything at all. But I love the way he plays his cricket, the way he goes about it. So I'm glad he's having a good test match. I think it stumps there as I record this. Is he still in? But he was 60 last time I had a look. Look, brilliant. He's doing well over there. Took the 6 for us. Obviously, old forever, and was probably was helped out by the fact that he didn't have the best spinners at the other end to chip in. But he's a fantastically interesting crowd because he is limited, but he works very hard. But he's also, I think his standard off break is actually really good. The amount of times I've seen him bowl at the very players of spin, and he checks them. Look, I'm not president CEO of the Andy McBride thing, and it's great to see some of the players start to refer to him online as the pinch blocker and sort of join in on the fun. And it was, it wasn't really about him. It was kind of about Imran Khan as much as anyone, but it was meant to say that what a remarkable cricketer is to be able to do the things that he does. So I'm glad that he's having such a good test match. Ireland are they still going at the moment? What are they? 131 runs ahead. Probably by the time this podcast is out, you'll know more what the result is. But if you're listening live on YouTube, they're giving themselves a chance. That's all you can ask for. John says, did you see we'll have no DRS at the World Cup qualifiers? Yeah, it's unacceptable. $1 billion game. They sell these TV rights for great amounts. They go on and on and on about how much money they make and how well they're doing. And then cut corners. I don't know if anyone saw this in the I want to say it was Canada and Namibia. But Bertus Jong did the tweet, but I was thinking, there was a moment where the umpire at the bowler's end was in completely the wrong position for a run out. And everyone makes mistakes and everything else, but umpires really shouldn't be in the wrong position. I've got more sympathy for them making the wrong call. That happens all the time, and all those sorts of things. But you shouldn't not be in the right position. That's a really basic thing. He didn't go anywhere near the crease. I don't know how he would have seen the run out correctly. It was really a moment. Now, that is, a lower level again. But these teams are playing for their World Cup future, and their World Cup future means millions of dollars. It sometimes can change the way a sport can go. In fact, this is one of my favorite stories, the Denmark story, where Denmark ended up Sri Lanka in the semi-finals in 1979 qualifiers, and they basically did that because Sri Lanka had forfeited a game against Israel for political reasons. And Denmark played in, one of the other teams. They probably qualified for the final to go on to the World Cup. That's Denmark cricket was really strong. They were producing county players. Cricket had a real movement there. Had they made that World Cup, and maybe, continued to go in the direction that they were going, Denmark's probably a test playing nation by now, or at the very least at that level of Scotland or the Netherlands. You could argue they might have, been slightly better than those teams in that period. These things matter. And the teams are playing for a spot in the World Cup, which is huge for them, for the players, for the fans and everything. But for their actual cricket, they're playing for the future. To not have DRS, and we saw it at the Women's World Cup in 2017 as well. It's just not good enough. It's not acceptable. Oh, wait, what was I going to do? I was on the comments, wasn't I? Sorry. Blank. Amit says, as far as chasing calculation with risk aversion, who is the Michael Bevan equivalent in current T20? I'm assuming you're not there. Does Miller make into that conversation? Yeah, Miller's an interesting one. The new Miller, not just because he's so much more explosive than Bevan, but I suppose you kind of have to be more explosive in T20. I know this is going to sound silly, but Blood kind of followed that. He just did it in a slightly different way. I suppose Coley is another one when he's checking, keeping it there. I don't know if he still counts as, more than T20 player in that way. I would have thought Miller is probably what, that newest style of T20 player rather than someone like Bevan. Just in Miller doesn't quite, I'd have to go through the numbers, but I don't think Miller quite leaves it to the last minute. I wonder if Hayden Markram, the top end, might not be someone who could be in that similar mold. Maybe he hasn't done enough to be the Michael Bevan, of course, but I feel like I've seen a few times where he's taken a game deep when I wouldn't have thought he had to. Where are we? Nicole says, are there skills from other sports that have changed cricket? Drag flick in hockey. Not and you've also mentioned the tennis backhand. So I'm not sure drag flick in hockey, unless you know of a particular example. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. The one that I was thinking of was obviously and now I've forgotten the name. Is it hurling? The players who played hurling having more ability to play reverse sweeps and everything else. I thought the hockey did play a part. I'm not sure the drag flick specifically, but I thought hockey did play a part in changing some of the techniques, the way the players played. It's players like Joss Butler played, who I think was a hockey player. I think that's right. I think if you have a look, the way that Surreyors would talk about their power game, they would talk about it much more like in a way that golfers did. So that certainly played a big part in the way that people were thinking about hitting the ball. The other one, the tennis backhand that you're talking about, I don't know. I've never heard a player talk about this. I can only talk about from my experience as a tennis player. When I started playing the reverse sweep, I was completely lost until one day, just almost accidentally, I just played it like a tennis backhand, and suddenly, well, this is easy. I almost felt more comfortable sometimes turning around against the spinner than I did just playing with a straight bat. So I'm assuming I'm the only player, and I do know that George Bailey is a very, very good tennis player. Me and him are still supposed to have a match against each other one day. So I think he plays a lot, so he'll probably kick my ass. Plus, he's a professional athlete, so he'll definitely kick my ass. But he was a tennis player. I've never seen him play, but I can only guess he has a double-handed backhand, and he was someone who played the reverse sweep a lot. And I'm trying to remember if he was another hockey player. So yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head. What else? Obviously, kabaddi. No, not kabaddi. What's the one where you flick your flick your fingers. Is certainly another one that would have played a part. I think those are the ones off the top of my head. I think if you really think about sport, there's so many different things that can help you from other sports, but they're not always completely obvious, and sometimes probably subconscious. Amit says, Virat said himself that they're having a contract with the BCCI about not doing adventure sports. Yeah, now you've said that, Amit, you're right. I'm just going back to that question before. I do remember that, and I think I've got a feeling Cricket Australia has something similar in their contracts as well. They do. There is a certain amount of freedom given to the players as well, just from the point of, I don't think they've quite got to the level of demanding that players completely do what they want at all times. But there's no doubt that we are getting to that point in cricket. All right, I'm going to take a quick break here on Wagon Wheel. And then after the break, we will have final questions from the room.
If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far.
Yeah, big thanks actually to everyone on the chat today and who's listening on the podcast and everything else. Any way you could support us is huge for us. We're trying to get more professional. We've obviously brought Cheyenne in and, got some other people around the traps as well. So the more that you can help, the better. Josh has remembered the name of the sport. Complete the sport. I'm not sure. Anyway, Cam. So, we know that those sorts of things. In fact, the wrong was invented by Bosey, who was playing with the tennis ball. I think that's right. And was there another ball that was invented by someone who had who was playing with a table tennis ball? So even having different balls in your hands, I think all those things do make a big difference. Just a couple of questions left, and then somehow my has managed to hold on barely, I think, for this episode. I can't read my screen. Mrinal says, instead of impact player, what if two teams could exchange their 11th man with each other? Cricket would play like Among Us. I haven't played Among Us, and I haven't even got my kids, so I can't do that. Yeah, but I do think, I know this is going to, but I do think there's other cool things you could do with substitutions going ahead. But when you talk about that sort of thing, that actually makes me think more about, especially for international cricket and even domestic cricket. But that's another story. I really think we could, have a lot more fun with trades. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying, where would Rahane for Zimbabwe? And how handy would he be? And all these. There are so many good cricketers out there that sort of fade away really early because there are players at their position. Folks. Let's say Bairstow gets the gloves back and Folks gets squeezed out. How many other teams could use a Folks? So I like the idea of changing players, maybe not particularly within the game. Although, hey, let's just go with it. Sabiyasachi says, frustrating that umpires slow the game down by referring to even simple run-out stumpings and being in the right position. Can umpires be trusted to make wide, height, no ball calls? Well, they shouldn't be. I've said that for a long time. The technology's there. That's easy enough to fix. On your first point, it really must. And I don't know how long you've been watching cricket, but when that law first came in, umpires were a lot more winning stuff out on the field, and they occasionally made mistakes. And they didn't see that the foot had slightly raised, or that the ball had been fumbled, or whatever it may be. Those little things that are hard to see. And because of that, it makes sense to do it. I understand the frustration, don't get me wrong. I think the bigger frustration quite often is the speed of which the replays go. If you've watched 100, it does feel like there's a better way to be able to do this than we currently have them. But yeah, I definitely get the I definitely get the point of that so far. But I think we'd rather get the better decisions rather than anything else. Last two, Dex says, Dutch women's cricket team has been the majority of players who are ethnically Dutch. Why isn't this case with the men's team? What is ethnically Dutch? Are South Africans ethnically Dutch? I'm not even sure how that works. Oh, sorry, forgot to press the button on that one. Dex. So I don't really know what ethnically Dutch means, like in this context, because obviously, you know, there are a lot of South African players who might consider themselves ethnically Dutch because of their family members. But I would assume that there are, because of the way that cricket works and professionalism within the men's game, that there are more men available out there that can be poached to play professionally, who might have passports and family members who are Dutch, and less when it comes to women. Certainly when it comes to women being known, there aren't that many professional women to choose from at this stage, so that might be something that would change in the future. That would be my guess, that they're literally the men's team that out there looking at players from, you know, Australia, New Zealand, India, Pakistan, who have connections to the Netherlands. And with the women's team at the moment, you know, I would say that there's probably not as much of an overplay. Probably not as many Tom Coopers out there in women's cricket, or Ryan Descartes out there in women's cricket. It's not that, you know, there are the top level players, maybe aren't that second and third degree of player. I could be wrong, but that would be my guess. That would make the most sense to me. Thinking about it. And last one. Korak, I think. How impressed are you with how Lorcan Tucker developed for the past year or so? Look, I thought Lorcan Tucker was at best maybe a plucky number 6. 32 average guy, 28 to 32 average guy. I thought he could hit the ball pretty well, so he could be handy in one cricket. Last 8 months? I mean, you said last year, I think maybe even less than that. 6 months, 8 months, he's just been so much other than that. And his development has shocked me. I certainly didn't see this coming from him. My biggest worry for him was that Harry Tater was a very good player, and Lorcan Tucker was a good supporting player, but what they really needed was another player of Tater's. I would make sure I'm saying Tater and Tucker, that they're not even that similar. For some reason, my brain mixes them up. And it looks like I'm wrong at stage. It looks like Lorcan Tucker might be maybe not the better player, but he might go on to have as good a record as Harry Tater. He might be better in all 3 formats than Harry Tater is. Fantastic player so far. And I definitely did not see this coming. I watched for about a year and a half. So I had a few balls to look at, and I think he's developing so fast, and it'd be really interesting to see where he will be in a year and a half, because you do have periods, of course, where you can make a lot of runs kind of before everyone works you out a little bit. Doesn't quite feel like the case with him at the moment. And, you know, we talked about Andy McBride before, but obviously Lorcan Tucker's 100 in that test match, you know, is given the chance of a win, or at least a sniff of a win, or at least not getting punched in the face. So huge from them. I'm really impressed with the way his game has improved so fast from, as I said, like more of a semi-specialist to, at the very least, at the moment, he looks like a specialist, and he's starting to look like a really important player going into the future. Anyway, that's the end of Wagon Wheel today. We will, if you're listening to this on the podcast, there'll already be a video on the site about Badgery. Watching on YouTube, you have to wait for a few hours before that gets uploaded. But big thanks to everyone again for putting in the questions. If you want to ask 100 on this, the best way to do it is via Patreon. And if you are listening live on YouTube, the best way to get your questions asked to ask about Aubrey Faulkner, or to do a super chat. Those are the two best ones. But thank you very much again for all your support, and we'll see you again next time, which will probably be it'll be covered in a few days' time, of which we are hoping that Barrett Racer actually exists.